If you live in the United States and you don't live under a rock, you probably know the government is reprioritizing things. Tens of thousands of people have already been laid off, and I've got to think that that will only increase. I haven't been affected yet, but I probably will be. I am a federal contractor, and my contract is up for renewal. So even though this would have sounded crazy to me just a couple of months ago, there is a real chance that I lose my job. So in this video, I'm going to explain the 5 things I'm doing to prepare just in case I lose my job. And at the very end, I'll explain why I still think I'll be able to retire before I turn 30 years old, even if I do get fired. So the very first thing I'm doing is building a bigger buffer. Over half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, which means if they lost their jobs, they'd be going into debt almost instantly. And this is really dangerous because finding a new job is not always a quick process. I know really smart people who spend over 6 months looking for their next job. And I know other people getting master's degrees right now who are having real trouble finding anything. And this only gets harder when more people are entering the job market. With mass layoffs, there's even more competition and less jobs to go around. And that's why it's super important to at least have a few months of savings. Recently, I've been living super lean. I've only been keeping around 2 to 3 months of living expenses in my checking account, and everything else I send to my investment account. That's not as much time as I'd like, so I'll probably increase this to at least 6 months of living expenses. The good news, at least for me, is that I probably don't have to change any of my current habits in order to do this, because I'm in grad school right now and I have to pay for those classes up front. So as long as I get good grades, my company will reimburse me. At the end of this semester, I'm expecting around $10,000 back from my company. So what I'll probably do is stash all of that reimbursed money rather than putting it into the market. Because ideally, you want enough money to not only cover the months that you don't have a job, but also enough money to move to start a new job. So if it takes you 3 months to find a new job and $10,000 to move, then you want $10,000 plus whatever you spend over the course of 3 months saved as an emergency reserve. And it should go without saying that the less money you spend, the less money you need as a backup reserve. If you've watched any videos on the channel, you probably know that I live very frugally. So for me, I really only need to save up around $10,000 to cover 6 months of living expenses. So I don't have to save up very much money, and by living frugally, I also get to save money a lot faster. So if I really had to, saving up an extra $10,000 wouldn't take me that long. But if you're spending 100 grand every year, then you probably want some pretty serious savings if you're worried about getting laid off. And if you're spending that much money, you're probably not saving that much money. So here's an action item. Figure out how long your current savings would last if you lost your job in 2 weeks from now. And ideally, you do not want to sell your investments. That introduces extra taxes, and it might not be a great time to sell in the market. If you really need to, it is an option, but ideally, you want to avoid that. And if you want to figure out how long your savings will last, you really need to know 2 things. First, you obviously need to know how much money you have in savings. But the second thing you need to understand is how much money you're spending every month. Figuring out how much money you have in savings is pretty simple. But figuring out how much money you spend is actually a little more difficult for a lot of people. If you don't track this already, I put a budgeting template in the description that you can use to start tracking your expenses. If you don't know how much money you're spending, you won't know how long your savings will last. So having a bigger buffer will give you a lot more security if you do lose your job. But it's also really important to need less. There is absolutely nothing worse than buying a house and then immediately losing your job. Not only will you have huge payments on your house that you'll have to make every single month, but you'll also be stuck in the same area for the foreseeable future. The point is, if you're worried about losing your job, you do not want to make decisions that limit how much money you have and how flexible you can be. Now, personally, I can't make too many changes here because I'm already pretty frugal. But if you're thinking about a big purchase, then you probably don't want to make it. That means no house, no new car, nothing like that. You might not be able to make changes to your current fixed costs, but you can at least avoid signing up for new ones. And you also want to cut anything that is not essential. When you reduce your expenses, you'll save up a bigger buffer way faster. But also, and this is just as important, that buffer will last for way longer because you're spending less every month. This can give you so much more time to find a new job and make any changes you need to make before you start going into debt. So again, I'm not making big changes here because I'm already living pretty frugally. But I am definitely not going to stop living with roommates, I'm definitely not going to buy a car, and I'm definitely not going to make any other big financial purchases that would put my savings at risk. But no matter what, your savings are not going to last forever. So it's also really important to prepare for what's next. Now personally, I do not want to take a new job because I'm in the middle of a master's degree, and I'd really like to finish that master's degree before I move off to another company. But at the same time, if I do lose my job, I want to be able to start looking immediately. I've personally found that my resume and my LinkedIn profile are almost always out of date. Now is a really good time to start thinking about updating them. And no matter what, I do try to keep track of all of my big accomplishments. Whenever I finish a big project or get positive feedback from anybody who is more senior to me, I keep track of that so I have a database of all of my accomplishments. It is so easy to forget all of the good work that you've done if you're not writing it down somewhere. And it's also a really good time to be asking for recommendations and referrals. Everybody knows that it's a very uncertain time, and bosses are much more likely to give you a referral when the reasoning is that you're afraid of losing your job rather than you're looking for a new job. So don't be afraid to ask. Having somebody else's recommendation goes an extremely long way. And it's also a good time to start learning anything that would look good on a resume. So what I recommend you do is go look at real job descriptions that you might be interested in and see what they're actually asking for. What you want to do is build up something to match every single bullet that they ask for. Even if it's not real, practical, hands-on experience, you can still take a little course or do a little tutorial to have something to talk about that relates to that topic. If you get into an interview and you can talk to every single point that they want to see, that's going to look much better than if you didn't do anything. And even if all you do is follow a tutorial step by step, that's going to look way better than just saying you read about something somewhere. Being able to point to real things you built is going to make your resume really stand out compared to everybody else. So personally, I already mentioned the master's degree, which I'm really hoping will help me stand out, but I won't complete that master's degree until sometime this fall. Hopefully, I'll still have a job by then, but it's a little uncertain right now. So the other thing I'm doing is renewing my CompTIA Security Plus certification. This is a really common cybersecurity certification, and a ton of job applications ask for it. The point is, you want something to make you stand out that isn't just the college you went to and the years of experience you have. But in the unfortunate circumstance that you really do lose your job and you don't have something lined up immediately, then you'll really want to understand unemployment benefits. Unemployment benefits are really something that I didn't know anything about. Now, if you are a federal employee, then there's unemployment compensation for federal employees, or UCFE. But this is still administered through your state, so you'll probably apply through your state's unemployment office. In Virginia specifically, which is where I live, there's a resource package for federal employees, because so many federal employees live here. This resource package just has other links and helpful resources that you might be able to leverage as you're searching for your next position. But personally, I'm a federal contractor rather than a federal employee, so none of these work for me. So I'd be working through the regular state unemployment office. Virginia unemployment benefits max out at $378 per week, which is about $19,600 per year, although I think they only last for 6 months. Even this would cover all of my expenses though. Again, there's a real power to being frugal. Virginia also has the Virginia Has Jobs site to look at other local jobs. Although if I did lose my job, I'd probably be looking all across the nation. I'm not stuck just to this area. But every state is different in terms of unemployment benefits, so definitely look into yours. But if you are worried about losing your job, then the most important thing you can do is to just ask yourself one question. What is your emergency plan? If you truly had just 2 weeks before losing your job, what would you actually do? And a lot of the things that I've talked about in this video, like saving up a higher buffer, aren't things that you can do in just 2 weeks. So you have to start preparing now. I understand that the idea of losing your job can be really stressful for a lot of people, but that doesn't mean that you just want to ignore it and deal with it when you get there. The more time you have to plan in advance, the better off you're going to be. Now personally, if I really do lose my job, I probably won't stay in Virginia for that long. I live in an extremely expensive area and there is no reason to stay around here. And so many of the companies around here are also federal contractors, So everybody's going to be in the same position. If I didn't have something lined up immediately, I'd probably move home back to Colorado Springs and move in with my parents to save money. But I definitely wouldn't stay there for that long. If I didn't have a new job lined up very quickly, I'd also seriously consider moving abroad. Since I've been so frugal for the first 3 years of my career, I've already saved up over $200,000. And in another country, that money could last for a really long time. I would seriously consider moving abroad and just going all in on this YouTube channel, at least for a few years. And no matter what, the cheaper cost of living in so many other countries would at least help me buy a lot more time before I needed to get another real job. And this is also why I still think I'll be able to retire before I turn 30 years old, even if I do lose my job. I've saved up enough money so far that if I move to a country like Thailand or Vietnam, I could probably already retire. So honestly, losing my job might speed up my early retirement. I've put myself in a position where I have enough savings to probably retire somewhere else. And honestly, this is why it's so freaking important to save as much money as possible. I talk a lot on this channel about living frugally, trying to reach financial freedom in order to retire early. But early retirement is not the only reason to live frugally and save as much money as you can. Because crazy things really do happen unexpectedly. And just 2 months ago, it hadn't even crossed my mind that I might lose my job. So I consider myself extremely fortunate. I've put myself in a position where I'm pretty safe even if I do lose my job. Losing my job would still be a speed bump and a bit of a hiccup in my plans, but I'm not going to go bankrupt anytime soon. But I also recognize that there are so many people who are living paycheck to paycheck right now who are probably extremely stressed about losing their jobs. And there's probably already so many people who already have lost their jobs who didn't have a plan B. And now, if you're struggling to find ways to save money, I'm about to drop a monster video about 50 different strategies that I personally use to save around 80% of my income every year. If you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, you'll get an alert when it releases. But the best place to start is with the expenses that you can change right now, because there are a few saving strategies that you can use to start saving more money instantly. I explained the very easiest ways to save money in this video right here, so check it out next. And I hope you don't lose your job.